Hi everyone, welcome to my green closet. So with our recent home renovations, I made it a priority to be conscious of reducing VOCs, lead, and other toxins and contaminants where we could, because as I learned, oh boy, there is a lot in construction materials, but also in new furniture and new houses in general. Now, I don't want this video to be fear-mongering. During my research, I fell down many rabbit holes which make it seem like you should be worried about absolutely everything in your house. But that's not actually the case, because with many things, we're talking about very low percentages and minute amounts. And you could honestly drive yourself crazy trying to have a completely toxin-free house. So instead, let's focus on the main culprits and what you can do to improve those areas. So let's start with VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds. These are emitted as a gas from a ton of different things and are concerning both because of potential short and long-term health effects and also environmental effects. Formaldehyde is one of the most well-known VOCs, but many others fall under the category as well. So in our homes, paint is a top source of VOCs. However, now we at least have low or no VOC paint options to choose from, so that is a fairly easy switch to make. Other finishes, coatings, adhesives, sealants, caulks, all release VOCs as well. And while there seem to be a few lower VOC options, and I will link a great list below from My Chemical Free Home, which was an amazing resource for all kinds of low chemical emission and safer building and interior products. However, in general, I found that these are unfortunately not nearly as widely available or easy to find as low VOC paint. So I found the best thing was to be sure to just wear a mask and open windows when using them. And also a big tip, if you are doing any home improvements or renovations, try to plan to do them in the summer when you can open windows for a long time. We did the majority of ours during the summer, but unfortunately our doors didn't come until into the winter, and it was so stinky and awful with all the spray foam and glue that they used, and it really showed me how important good ventilation is. Now, all of these liquid products are obvious sources of VOCs, and the most critical time is when they are a liquid and evaporate. Once they cure and the smell goes away, many seem to have little or relatively quick off-gassing. Which then brings us to the things that slowly off-gas VOCs. So unless you are currently doing construction or renovations, this is probably the biggest area of concern. Some products can actually off-gas for years. And while a strong chemically smell typically means an item is off-gassing, just because the smell goes away doesn't mean that the item is no longer off-gassing. Furniture, carpets, flooring, cabinets, basically anything made with adhesives, particle board, plastics, varnishes, or paints can off-gas. And while that might feel overwhelming because that's most of the things we have in our homes, there are actually a few easy ways to reduce off-gassing. First of all, and of course my favorite, is to buy things secondhand. It's way more sustainable, of course, and if that item has been out in the air for a few years, it's likely already done all of the off-gassing. And it's also the best way to save money when updating your home. But then, if you are buying something new, look for natural materials, try to find solid wood over composites, and you can also look for certifications like Green Guard. Also, when buying new, do a sniff test. Any strong chemical smells should be avoided, and if possible, to help reduce the amount of off-gassing that happens inside your home, you can let items air out in a garage or shed for a couple weeks. And finally, if you're concerned about items already in your home, you can get an air purifier for VOCs, which can help a bit. Now, you can also get air monitors built into things like thermostats. We have one with our Ecobee. And I am hesitant to recommend it, but I do quickly want to talk about it because it basically gives you a score or a rating on your VOCs and carbon dioxide. At least that's what ours does. And I don't know if it's the best. Sometimes I think too much information isn't actually that helpful. So unless you can kind of see a direct correlation of like, we use the stove a long time and our air quality went down, which kind of, makes sense. But sometimes you'll just get a reading that says like, oh, your VOCs are really high. and you have no idea what it's from, it just kind of gives you a problem that you really have no solution to. So while sometimes it's nice to be able to check and see what the reading says, and it can maybe give you a bit of peace of mind, I wouldn't really recommend any extra sensors unless you think that there is an actual problem. So next, let's chat about lead. Now, lead came up as a major concern initially because our house is old and in particular has old pipes. But what I was surprised by is how many new or newer products actually contain lead. So lead is a concern in drinking water. Some old houses have actual lead pipes, but copper pipes with lead solder seem to be common for older houses. Apparently lead solder was used until the 90s in Canada. It's less of a risk than actual lead pipes, but still a risk, especially if the pipes are older and corroding at all. And then there is also the faucets. Many are made of brass, and I was surprised to learn that it was only as recently as 2014 where regulations came in to significantly reduce the lead allowed in brass faucets, which up to that point could be as high as 8%. Now, replacing piping is a huge project, but replacing faucets at least isn't nearly as difficult. But honestly, the easiest thing to do if you're at all concerned, and what made me feel the most comfortable with our drinking water, is simply using a water filter. In our previous house, we would use one of the pitcher filters that you just refill, but with the new house, I wanted to get one that was built into the sink. Aquasana was a brand that stood out to me both for what it filters and also having very good reviews. And they kindly gifted me one of their under the sink filters. We're using the Clarium 3-stage max flow system. It was very easy to install and comes with a cute tap, lead-free of course, and the water flow is actually surprisingly fast compared to other water filters I've seen. So in addition to lead, it also filters out microplastics and other heavy metals and contaminants. So yeah, just like no matter what's going on with our pipes, it at least gives me peace of mind about our drinking and cooking water. Now, when I learned about leaded brass in faucets, out of curiosity, I just wanted to see if there are other things typically made from leaded brass, and unfortunately, there are a lot. Most things, though, fortunately, aren't really a concern, but the items that potentially can be a concern are hardware. So doorknobs and handles, cabinet hardware, particularly in the kitchen where you may be touching them frequently and then also touching food. Now, I initially thought that brass hardware looked like brass, but most hardware of all colors is actually still brass, just with a coating. So if you have hardware where the coating has rubbed off, you might want to consider testing it or replacing it. For example, most of the hardware in this house was either pretty old or maybe very cheap, and the coating was wearing off or rubbing off in some way, so we just ended up replacing all the hardware. And finally, let's chat briefly about microplastics. I've obviously discussed them a lot in the context of clothing, but they are also an issue in our homes. Flooring, carpet, blinds, rugs, sofas can be made from synthetic materials and be a source of microplastic pollution. To reduce inhaling and ingesting microplastics in your home, you can dust and vacuum regularly, but even better is to try and stick with natural materials where you can. Sometimes it can be very hard. Like I found there really aren't many natural upholstery options with furniture, but you just, like with anything, try to do your best. Although the top things I avoid like the plague when it comes to home decor and microplastics is first, anything sparkly and with glitter, and also anything that is really fuzzy and fluffy. So I know some people will be upset about this, but those fuzzy throw blankets that are really popular, or the fluffy synthetic shag rugs, if it's furry and made from synthetics, it is likely a microplastic factory. So those are some of the things we try to be conscious of to just generally improve our air quality a bit and reduce some toxic chemical exposure. I was actually quite surprised how bad construction materials can be. So for sure, if you're doing any kind of home renovations, be sure to wear a mask, wear protective gear, vacuum, and kind of keep dust and things to a minimum as best as you can. It's obviously really hard to do, especially if you're DIYing, but it's worth it to spend a little extra time putting on some safety equipment or taking some safety steps. All right, so I am going to wrap things up there. I hope that this video was helpful, and if you're interested in any of this, definitely check out my chemical-free home. I'll link it below. I found that to be such a great resource, especially for looking for better construction materials and home products. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.